Hey everyone! Before we dive into the steel and fire of today's story, I need to ask you a favor. If you're passionate about untold engineering stories, about the raw decisions made in the shadows of global conflict, about machines that shaped our world, you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. This isn't just a history lesson. It's a journey into the mindset of an empire under pressure. And I want you to be part of this community. Your thoughts are crucial. So when we're done, leave a comment. Tell me what you think. Argue with me. Share your knowledge. Now let's get into it. The ticking clock and the fragile balance. Imagine the world at the dawn of the 1960s. The memory of the Second World War is still fresh, a raw nerve. But a new, even more terrifying paradigm has taken hold. The Cold War. It's not just a political standoff. It's a psychological and technological duel on a planetary scale. The Cuban Missile Crisis will soon bring the world to the literal brink of nuclear annihilation. The Berlin Wall rises, a concrete scar dividing a continent. In this high-stakes poker game, the chips are missiles, ideologies, and armored divisions. The doctrine of the time is succinct and horrifying: mutual assured destruction. But for that doctrine to hold, a balance is needed. And on the ground, that balance was measured in the quality and quantity of main battle tanks. This was the era of the potential great tank battle in the plains of Europe, a clash of steel titans that was drilled into, planned for, and feared by both NATO and the Warsaw Pact. Now let's look at the Soviet hand. By the turn of the decade, the workhorses of the Red Army's armored fists were the T-54 and its incremental successor, the T-55. I have immense respect for these machines. They were the AK-47s of the tank world. Globally ubiquitous, mechanically simple, brutally effective, and mastered by every mechanic from East Germany to Vietnam. Their 100mm rifled gun, a direct descendant of a Second World War anti-tank gun, was a respected weapon. It could handle the first generation of NATO tanks, the American M46s and M47s, the British Centurions. But here's where the anxiety begins to creep in. Progress, especially for your adversary, doesn't sleep. And in the late 1950s, Western intelligence starts piecing together a disturbing picture, one that would soon become an open secret. The British had done something extraordinary. They had created the L-7 tank gun, a 105mm rifled masterpiece. To understand the shockwave this sent through Soviet design bureaus, you have to grasp ballistic physics. The L-7 wasn't just a little better. It was a generational leap. Its new armor-piercing discarding Sabo APDS and later fin-stabilized APFSDS rounds could, in theory, punch through the frontal armor of a T-55 at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters. Ranges where the Soviet tank's own gun was becoming ineffective. Worse, the L-7 wasn't just for a boutique British tank. It became the standard. The Americans adopted it for their M60. The Germans for their Leopard 1. It was the new benchmark. And as if that wasn't enough, the British were already finalizing the Chieftain, a behemoth with a massive 120mm rifled gun. The message was clear. The technological spearhead of NATO was about to get much sharper, and Soviet armor was in danger of becoming obsolete before it even rolled off the production lines. This information wasn't lost in some military journal. It reached the very top. It reached Nikita Sergeyevich Khrushchev. And Khrushchev, the man who banged his shoe at the UN, the man of the missile gap, was not one to tolerate a tank gap. The order came down, and it was laced with political urgency. Close this gap. Now, we need a new tank, and we need it yesterday. The philosophy of pragmatism, the Ural school of thought. This is where the drama splits into two acts, centered on two brilliant but philosophically opposed design schools. In Kharkiv, Ukraine, under the legendary Alexander Alexandrovich Morozov, the team was working on the future. Their project, Object 432, was revolutionary. It aimed to leapfrog the West entirely. It featured an autoloader for a reduced crew, a new suspension, composite armor. This machine would eventually become the T-64. But revolution takes time. It was fraught with technical teething problems, complexity, and a high degree of risk. It was the silver bullet solution, but it wasn't ready for the factory floor. Meanwhile, in the industrial heartland, in the city of Nizhny Tagil nestled in the Ural Mountains, a different mindset prevailed. Led by the pragmatic Leonid Nikolaevich Kartsev, the Ural Design Bureau operated on a core principle: evolution, not revolution. Their mantra was reliability, manufacturability, and continuity. They looked at the panic in Moscow and saw a different path. Why reinvent the wheel when you can reinforce it and fit it with a new, more powerful engine? Their starting point was the known universe, the T-55. Their first answer to the firepower problem was Object 165. It took a T-55 hull, fitted a new, larger turret with a bigger turret ring, and installed a more powerful, longer 100mm rifled gun, the UATS. It was a sensible upgrade, but in the race against the L-7 it was still playing catch-up. It was better, but not decisively so. Then fate or ingenuity offered a twist. The Soviet Army had just adopted a new towed anti-tank gun, the T-12 Rapra. It was smoothbore, and its ammunition was a revelation. Fin-stabilized, subcaliber penetrators that flew faster and hit harder than traditional spinning rounds. The immediate thought was, put this gun on a tank. But the shells for the T-12 were enormous. In the cramped fighting compartment of a tank, a loader would be wrestling with rounds the size of small tree trunks. It was impractical. And here, in my opinion, is where Kartsev's genius shone through with a beautifully simple, almost hack-like solution. He looked at the new UATS gun and asked, what if we just remove the rifling? Take a smooth tube, enlarge the caliber slightly to 115mm to maintain volume, and fire those new, sleek, fin-stabilized projectiles. It was elegant. It bypassed the need for entirely new, oversized ammunition. It used existing industrial knowledge but applied it in a novel way. Thus, the U-5TS Malat hammer was born. And with it, Object 166. The bureaucratic wheels, greased by urgency, spun faster than ever before. From conception to acceptance, it was a blur. In August of 1961, the same year Yuri Gagarin orbited the Earth, Object 166 was formally adopted into service as the medium tank T-62. It was a historic milestone. The world's first serially produced main battle tank with a large caliber smoothbore gun. It wasn't born from a peaceful decade of research. It was forged in the white-hot urgency of perceived inferiority. Anatomy of a stopgap solution, strengths and compromises. Let's open up this machine and see what made it tick. Walking around a T-62, you immediately sense its lineage. The classic layout, for crew members. Driver in the hull front left. In the turret, commander and gunner on the left, the lonely loader on the right. No autoloader here. This meant a slower rate of fire, about 4 rounds per minute versus 5 or 6 for the T-55. In a duel, that's a disadvantage. But Kartsev's team traded rate of fire for other advantages. One of their masterstrokes was the spent casing ejector. After firing, the gun automatically elevated to a fixed loading angle, the breech opened, and a mechanical arm would grab the smoking, empty shell casing and dump it out through a small hatch in the rear turret bustle. Think about that. In a tightly sealed turret, firing even a dozen rounds without this system would fill the space with toxic, choking propellant fumes. This system, while mechanically added, significantly improved crew endurance. It was a detail that showed thoughtful design under constraint. The heart was the familiar V12 diesel, the V55V, putting out 580 horsepower. It wasn't a powerhouse, but it was known, reliable, and every mechanic from Magdeburg to Vladivostok knew how to fix it. The tank weighed 37 to 38 tons, could do about 50 kilometers per hour on road, and had a range of 450 kilometers. The suspension, 5 road wheels per side, torsion bars virtually identical to the T-55. This was the core of the Tagil philosophy, maximum parts commonality. A unit in the field could cannibalize a damaged T-55 to keep a T-62 running. The factories didn't need to completely retool. This was economics and logistics designed into the steel. Now the armor. This is where the stopgap nature is most apparent. To keep weight down while accommodating the larger turret, they didn't radically increase protection. The frontal hull was 100 millimeters thick, sloped at 60 degrees, respectable, but essentially the same as the T-55. The turret, however, was new, a homogeneous steel casting, smoother and more rounded than its predecessors. At its thickest point on the front, it was over 200 millimeters. But, and this is a critical but, against the latest Western APDS rounds, it was frighteningly vulnerable at typical combat ranges. The hammer, a double-edged sword. The soul of the T-62 was its U-5TS Malat 115mm smoothbore gun. This weapon embodies the tank's entire story, a bold leap forward hobbled by the realities of its rushed birth. Its new ammunition was revolutionary for the Soviet arsenal. The early subcaliber penetrators, like the 3BM3, could theoretically defeat the frontal armor of an American M60 or a British Chieftain at ranges up to 1,000, maybe 1,500 meters. This finally gave Soviet tankers a round that could reach out and touch the new generation of NATO tanks. The high-explosive anti-tank heat round could burn through any armor thickness at any range, a great equalizer. However, the gun had significant flaws, born from its smoothbore nature and the technology of the time. Fin-stabilized projectiles are extremely sensitive to crosswinds. At long ranges, their accuracy plummeted compared to a stabilized rifled round like the L7's. Furthermore, the fire control system was rudimentary. The initial gunner's sight was a simple telescopic one, and the meteor stabilizer was crude. Engaging a moving target from a moving platform at over a kilometer was more an art than a science. The powerful laser rangefinder, the KDT-1, wasn't added until the mid-70s as a refit. So, the brutal calculus of a hypothetical NATO versus Warsaw Pact tank duel in, say, 1965 looked like this. A British Chieftain or an American M60 with an L7 gun could see the T-62, range it, and hit it accurately at 2,000 meters. The T-62 crew would be struggling to even spot the enemy effectively at that range, and if they fired, their shot had a high probability of missing due to wind drift or range error. The T-62 had to close the distance, use terrain, and ambush. It was not a dueling weapon. It was a brawler's tool. This leads me to my central thesis about the T-62. It was never meant to be the best tank in a one-on-one comparison. It was meant to be a good enough tank produced in overwhelming numbers. It was a tool for the Soviet deep battle doctrine, a tool for massive breaking assaults where quantity, logistical simplicity, and a sudden increase in firepower had a quality all its own. In that sense, it is the direct spiritual successor to the T-34. Not the most advanced, but the most right for the industrial and military ecosystem that created it. Baptism by fire, a global soldier. The T-62 never fought the great European war it was built for. Instead, it found itself in a series of brutal, smaller conflicts that tested its mettle in unexpected ways. The Middle East, the Yom Kippur War, 1973, this was its true baptism of fire. In the hands of Egyptian and Syrian crews, T-62s clashed head-on with Israeli upgraded Centurions, Shotcal, and M60s. The results were sobering. New Israeli APF-SDS rounds, like the M111, sliced through the T-62's frontal armor with terrifying ease. Soviet post-war analysis was shocked by the losses. Yet, the Malat gun also took a fearsome toll. The war proved that in a stand-up fight against a well-trained enemy with technological parity or superiority, the T-62 was vulnerable. It reinforced the need for combined arms, mass, and tactical cunning. The Soviet-Afghan War, 1979 to 1989 here, the T-62 was used as a mobile artillery piece and bunker buster in the mountains. Its powerful high-explosive shell was good for demolishing mud-brick fortifications. But in the rugged terrain, its disadvantages screamed. The low gun depression made it hard to fire from reverse slopes. Its high silhouette made it a perfect target for Mujahideen RPG teams firing from above. Crews sweltered in the metal oven under the Afghan sun. It was a fish out of water, yet it soldiered on. Chechnya, the post-Soviet conflicts. In the rubble of Grozny in the mid-90s, T-62s, often in the hands of inexperienced crews, were slaughtered in urban ambushes. Their poor situational awareness and weak side/top armor made them death traps against modern infantry anti-tank weapons. Yet, even here, they were used because they were available. And this is the final, ironic chapter of the T-62 story. It is still in combat today. You will see it in the grinding battlefields of Ukraine, often used as indirect artillery. You can find it in the sands of Syria and the conflicts of Africa. Why? The same reasons it was built. Simplicity, durability, and vast warehouses of cheap, available 115mm ammunition. It is the cockroach of the tank world, not glamorous, but incredibly hard to eradicate. Final thoughts, the legacy of the pragmatic warrior. So, what is the final verdict on the T-62? It's easy to look at the spec sheets and the battle reports and label it a failure, a desperate patch that couldn't truly compete. I vehemently disagree with that simplistic view. The T-62 is a monument to pragmatic engineering under immense political pressure. It is a case study in how to deliver a capability on time and at scale. It wasn't designed to win a top trumps comparison with a chieftain. It was designed to be built by the tens of thousands, to be maintained by conscript soldiers, and to bring a new level of kinetic energy to the armored regiments immediately. It bridged a terrifying 5 to 7 year gap while the revolutionary but troubled T-64, and later the simpler T-72, matured. It validated the smoothbore gun path for the entire Eastern Bloc, a decision that defines Russian tank design to this day. It was the last of the classic Soviet tanks, the end of the direct lineage from the T-34. When I see a T-62, I don't see an obsolete piece of junk. I see the grim determination of the Cold War made solid. I see the triumph of good enough over perfect but late. I see a soldier that served from the deserts of Sinai to the Hindu Kush, a tool that outlived its empire and continues to echo on battlefields its designers could never have imagined. It was, in its own flawed, tough, and unpretentious way, a success. Because it did the one job it was tasked with, it held the line. What's your take? Do you see the T-62 as a heroic stopgap or a flawed design doomed from the start? Have you ever seen one, maybe in a museum? The comment section is right below. Let's get a discussion going. And if you want more deep dives into the untold stories of military tech, the kind that goes beyond the dry specs, then your support means everything. Hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next chapter. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.